Welcome everybody. Blessed are those that visit this channel and enjoy the content here.
As you mentioned, just like with ELEAGUE, you also sort of did a similar thing with Blast, who admittedly is a Danish company, and you knew some of the people involved, etc. I mean, obviously, some of the people behind Astralis were behind setting this up, right? This is another trend in your career, which is a lot of people in esports will play it safe, and they will maybe be with the same company, or sometimes they even just end up working for the company, if it's a game developer, a tournament organizer, whatever, because that's a way, again, to assure, like you say, security, get yourself years in advance, you know, you're going to be the guy doing the events, they'll put you on the finals. When you went and did Blast, a theme of your career has been you has seemingly always been willing when new things come along to try and dive into that, or to see if you can build up a new project or test the waters in the industry, if that's what's necessary. What would you say? What's the impulse behind this?
Again, I just think Counter-Strike is in a stronger position when there is more competition, like whether that's between casters or between teams or between tournament organizers. I just think that has to be the path forward in some sense. I think there actually is a counter argument that you could make where if you could have really only one tournament organizer, if you could have like a total monopoly, that actually would be a strong position for other reasons. Specifically for reasons of like sponsorship monetization becomes insanely powerful if you control the entire narrative. I just don't think that's ever going to happen. So the problem is, if that's not going to happen, I do think the space is kind of better for it if there's a lot of interesting competition and people with new ideas can come in and sort of try to up the level. And I would say for a good while, like the competition between Blast and ESL is responsible for a lot of great innovation in both companies, which is super. I mean, not really credited to me at all, just like the people who worked in those areas just, really try to outcompete each other and really try to, beat each other on like who has the best HUD, the best production, the best everything. And I think that's great. So for me, again, that probably comes down to the sort of the really long view of Counter-Strike, like the idea that when we look back on this another 10 or 20 years from now, then I think whatever Counter-Strike looks like then, a lot of it can be credited to the fact that that we generated like a healthy space for competition and for kind of like for things to grow, and I just think that's important. So if I can lend my whatever I can do to kind of like lend my abilities in that direction, I want to try and do that for sure. But it comes with a really big risk. It does, because you don't have the same kind of home that you could have maybe otherwise had. Like I feel like there definitely were opportunities for Semmler and I to say, okay, we're basically gonna just kind of like sit here and hold this ground and position and just try to be here forever and never ever move out of this position, and that would have been. I think we had more longevity in that sense, but I also just think it would have been the wrong move. But
one thing people might have noticed is you actually lost quite a lot of weight back then, especially when you're at your peak. Look, I'll explain a quick concept to people, which is, especially in the early days, like we weren't in the best hotels. So for example, hotels didn't even have gyms. Now it's actually a standard thing. A lot of pros just go to the hotel gym. It's actually become like a lifestyle thing because they're on the road. Yeah. Also, back then we used to work the whole day, or we wouldn't always get breaks. So when you work all day, you eat whatever food they bring you. And quite frankly, some of the catering food, listen, everyone's seen the videos. They know what I'm like with that shit. Like I never played that anyway. Sure. It's like school dinners. And the problem is I'm really picky with food anyway. So the joke would be, people now would think, oh, you're going to eat a burger and fries. Mate, a burger and fries was the dream. If you could get a runner to go and get you like fucking Five Guys, that was like you were waiting for the cast to end, mate. Like, oh god, that Five Guys is back in the room.
Let's go.
And obviously everyone was doing this back then, but it's obvious from pictures you got your absolute heaviest at this point, which I know was obviously unhealthy because it even affected when you had your knee injury. You had to wait because you needed to lose the weight to get the surgery. And if people don't know, that story was delayed so long, it was fucking ridiculous. That was like Half-Life 3 delay, mate. So you should have had that surgery like a month in. But there's a second detail, which is not only did he lose all the weight, which is sick, but because it was getting to a point that was like, it's getting dangerous now, mate. It's gone from like a meme, like lol, to like you're even bigger. I can even tell you a story, which is one time I remember we went to like some fucking diner after an event, on like the Sunday or whatever. And then it was that thing where, first of all, you almost your catchphrase became, "Can you put another burger in that?" Which is like, and then secondly, I actually felt guilty one time because we were at this thing and everyone had done an order, right? And then it got to me, and then on my order, I was like, "Oh, and I want one of these fucking like milkshakes, where it's like a milkshake with like chocolate ice cream and like a fucking thing." And And then you were like, yeah, I'll have one of those too. And I was like, and part of me felt like, oh, I'm like encouraging him now. I'm like, I'm the enabler. Oh, what am I doing? So I want to ask about this because, again, must be one of those things that on some level you must be aware of it. But I'm sure it comes to a point where you just realise, what, you have to change? How does that happen?
Yeah, how did it happen? I mean, definitely the whole knee thing was like a big part of it, right? I did snap my knee carrying Sipniks around in a club in Germany.
Something stupid, of course.
Really, well, especially stupid when you've got a newborn that you have to get home to help out. Like Walter would have been like 2 weeks old or something, and I was like, I'm coming home to help. Oh, I'm not, because I just snapped my knee instead, so I'm going to be on crutches and just be useless. So I think I realized for sure that, like, if I just stay super heavy, and maybe even worse than that, if I just don't have the muscle strength in my knee to kind of like hold it together, then it's going to be really bad. Like whether it's now or in like 20 years, like it's going to end up being a whole like knee replacement, whatever thing. So that was like a big thing. The other thing was just something really simple. Is like I noticed even after my knee was okay, and like I could walk on it and it didn't hurt or anything, I just noticed that something simple, like if you've got like a toddler and they're on the whatever living room floor playing around, and you get down to their level and you're playing around with stuff, and then I remember like the act of getting back up again and going to the kitchen was like kind of like I had to like I have to really like, it's like a real effort kind of thing, and that what it stops you from doing is if you don't have to go back into the room and get down again to play with your kid again, and then get up again and then get back in, like doing that like up and down kind of thing, like that in itself became sort of like a chore. So you just end up so there was like a real moment where I just thought like this also just sucks. Like I'll end up picking the choice where like I'm just kind of sat in a sofa instead and just like, hey, but I'm not crawling around doing all this thing because just like it's too much. So that was a big moment for me where I just thought it just seems like a really bad life, and I kind of don't want to try and live in this way. And then I think ultimately also I had like progressively different sort of realizations. Like I started going to the gym a lot more, and then at some point I realized I've maxed out on the gym front. Like I can, unless I want to spend 5 hours a day in the gym, I'm not going to lose more weight going to the gym now. Like the next step has to be to figure out like how can I stop myself from eating, like 5,000 calories a day or something crazy. So then once I had done that, I just realized, okay, like I have to make some choices. And I think it was during ELEAGUE, like especially, I started really saying like, okay, yes, there are like cookies and brownie or whatever else is like in the catering room, but I just have to skip all of that. Like I just have to leave it alone. I basically ended up doing like the whole keto thing. I think way before it even became like a sort of mainstream popular thing. I stumbled into it and I was like, this seems cool. I'll try this. And then, that just kind of all fit together really well. So yeah, like that was a really big change in my life. And like you said, probably really important too. If you think about like the trajectory otherwise is pretty grim, for sure.
Being as you are Danish, from the Danish scene, although, by the way, one thing actually is a quick aside, you don't really have, you have a weird accent, but you don't really have like a Danish accent. I mean, I saw in an interview once, you said something like you sort of like had British friends or something. You have once people know what the Danish accent is like, yours isn't really that much like that.
Yes, I mean, yeah, childhood friend of mine, his dad was from the UK, and then I think through him, I ended up watching a bunch of Monty Python stuff. And I just don't know, I can't explain it, but I just really enjoyed like that whole, there's something about the language and something about the use of it that I just really enjoyed. And it became the only topic in school that I actually cared about and I actually wanted to go to school for, was like, oh yes, we can, do more of this stuff. So I don't know why, but that just really early on, like I think to the point where I think in the 5th grade or 4th or 5th grade, something like that, I started doing all of my internal monologue in my head, all became English, like, and that just became like how I thought. So some kind of personality, transfer that just happened at some point.
Because the reason I asked the question, being Danish, is I want you to explain something to us. It's going to sound like a meme, but it's real. Can you explain Pimp? Because here's the thing. People will forget this. They know that story I told way back in the day about Cadian, which is actually, he wasn't always beloved. There used to be a Facebook group, Fuck Cadian. Everyone was in it. And then the only thing that united them was Fuck Cadian. Because he was saying, and people don't know, Pimp was a bit like that. He didn't even tell he was quite toxic. He himself was quite fat. Obviously, he's been through his own weight loss journey. And over the years, even as things have changed, he's always had a strange sort of bent to him. I will say, the last few years, by the way, he's sort of nailed his personality. He's done some really interesting things with his brand, where it's not as controversial. But I'll give you an example. When he first lost his weight, which I think was even back in 2015, I even remember there was an event I went to, which I won't say who it was in the context. He wouldn't mind me telling this story. Danes are like this. Remember, fucking Cadian published those pictures where he's with all bubble bath in the fucking jacuzzi. Yes. They're wild like that. Danes are they're just different, mate. There's different beasts. So there was once an event, right, where basically I went out for a night out. At this point in time, he became like a social animal, you know, because he wasn't fat. He was like, had confidence. And it gone the other way. First of all, I think he might have also done like a keto type thing. I can't remember what he did back then. But basically, when he lost loads of his weight, I think it had that effect on him too, where like alcohol affects you way more than it did when you were like heavier. And maybe you don't like anticipate that. So first of all, I think he was just like, you know, one too many shandies. But I remember after an event when we were all outside, you know, people are smoking and talking. One time he just came up like, like some cartoon character. He just came up like, into me and a couple of players who weren't on his team, I will stress, Anders. And he just went like, and then slapped one in the face like that. And I remember just thinking like, is he about to just get like the shit kicked out of him in this? Luckily, that other player was a super chill player. I won't say who, because I don't thoroughly mention. They were a super chill player who sort of was like, you know, he's a dickhead, whatever, I know, I don't mind. So what I want to ask is, he isn't on your... Is it just we're not Danish? If you're Danish, does he make sense? Is he an archetypal figure? Is he strange even to Danish? Who is Pimp? Who is Pimp, mate?
I think the reason why I would say that he's different from like a Danish point of view is that I think there is like a really strong tendency in Danish culture to be much more sort of, you know, if you're going to criticize somebody, it'll be through like a veil of like a lot of, you know, like, oh, well, I don't really think about this, or, you know, like there's going to be a lot of sort of, you know, sneaking around the topic more than being just much more direct and saying, I don't like when you do this, or I think this is bad, or whatever. Like that's considered impolite in maybe it is in a lot of places of the world, but there's definitely like a strong feeling of that. And I would say Jacob is much more someone who is, you know, ready to deliver criticism, especially if you just ask him for it, which I really appreciate. But I think that rubs a lot of people like kind of in the wrong way. I think actually it's one of the reasons why I really enjoy spending time with him is because I know if I call Jacob and I say, Jacob, I need your honest feedback on like this thing, then like he's gonna deliver that to me, and that I think that's pretty rare. So I like having people like that around me, that I can kind of go to for stuff like that. But I think the thing that I will always claim is that the most crazy thing about Jacob is not really his like weight loss transformation. It's actually his like personality transformation, because I think I'm doing a bit of mind reading, but my guess is that like Jacob's real kind of like the thing that kind of kept him afloat for a long time is that like he was just like good at Counter-Strike, and then through the lens of that, he could kind of, you know, he could sort of bully everyone else through that. It's like, you know, yes, I might be fat and I might be like, you know, a weird looking guy and all the rest of it, but I'm going to crush you in the server. And then I'm also going to be incredibly impolite and kind of like laugh at you and kind of like, you know, talk down to you from that platform, right? And it's so obvious that that's kind of like an escape mechanism from the fact that you're, you know, like a chubby dude who's not particularly confident in himself, right? So you're just letting it all out through like the game. And walking that around to becoming like the person that he is now, where like even if he's direct, like he's not an impolite person, he's just like I actually think it's the other way around in my opinion. Like I think there is a certain politeness in telling people what you think is kind of real, you know, and sometimes like hiding that fact I don't think is like, you know, if I come up to you and I say like, hey, you know, like if I have an alcohol problem and I ask you, oh, do you think I drink too much, Duncan? And you just say, no, don't worry, Anders, it's totally fine. Like, you know, have more drinks, you know, like at some point, like just pleasing people is not actually polite. But I think the fact that Jacob turned into like a genuinely pleasant person and someone who isn't just like a, you know, an asshole is so hard to do. Like it's so rare that people find a way to change their personalities in that way. So I just have so much respect for that. And again, his weight loss trend is obviously super crazy. And like, but I think it just says something about like the scale of it. Like, I don't know a lot of people who go from being really not like great people to being like, you know, really cool people. Like, I think it's hard to do. So I appreciate that.
One last thing about Semmler would be this. Obviously, at one point in time, there's a saying in English, all good things must come to an end. Eventually, your partnership, which was the most iconic one, did fracture. Now, I will say, I always like to feed this in here, something I thought about a lot when it comes to bands, etc. I was a big fan, for example, of Oasis, and as you can imagine, it was my youth was their heyday, wasn't it? And I can tell you, I also am a big fan of Noel Gallagher's solo stuff, but every time I would read online about his solo stuff, there'd be all the Oasis fans who'd be like, oh, fuck the solo stuff, just get back with Liam, you know, call him up, why don't you do that? And I always used to say to people like, bro, he did it for like 15 years or something. Like, that was a period of his life. Like, they're not actually like, even though they're brothers, they're not like connected at the hip. Like, they are allowed to go do other things in their lives. Like, maybe they don't even want to work together, whatever it might be, right? What would you say about breaking apart with Semmler? Because look, now he's not a caster at all. He's exited the industry. He's doing whatever he is. Don't worry, he's all okay, guys. He's not, nothing's wrong. But what would you say about that coming to an end? It's a big moment.
So Semmler, you know, sort of on his own, right? That was the question, just to be sure.
Yeah. Just breaking apart the partnership.
Yes. I mean, I don't remember how much Semmler has talked about this himself, right? But I mean, I think from my point of view, what it looked like was that there was sort of an increasing community pressure on Semmler as like a person in the space where people are like, we want different things out of him. We want him to, you know, basically be a different kind of caster. I think it's the most common sort of charge that people can throw at someone, which is basically something like, he doesn't know the game, or he doesn't understand the game, or whatever. Which is always really weird because people don't ever really define what they say or what they mean when they say that kind of thing. Like, there's never a follow-up like explanation. It's just like, it's a broad statement that you can say about almost anybody, and it's like, it's hard to defend yourself against. But I feel like Semmler tried to defend himself against that a lot. And in a way, from my point of view, it looked like it kind of got him out of balance in some way. And then outside of that, like, there was just a lot of crazy stuff that happened in Semmler's life around this time, which, you know, people in the community either didn't know about or even if they did, I doubt if anyone cares about that kind of stuff. Like, you're just seeing someone and you're like, oh, this guy doesn't seem quite like himself, you know, boo, kind of. And I think also more than that, Semmler and I at this point in time had almost achieved a kind of villain status in the eyes of some part of the community because they were on the Sadekist and Henry hero arc now. It's like Sadekist and Henry were the up-and-coming guys who were gonna, you know, who were sort of like, that's the underdog story, and people were like, you know, boo, no more Anderson Semmler, like, let's get these other guys a chance finally, you know, it's been long enough, which I actually on some level even agreed with. But we couldn't pull the brakes on that. Like, this is gonna sound dumb, but I actually asked a bunch of tournaments to say, can we just have Sadekist and Henry do the final here? Like, why? Because like, what's going to happen if Semmler and I keep doing it is basically that we're going to get hatred for it. Like, people are going to say, no more Semmler and Alex grand finals, please. And then, so it won't even benefit us. And these other guys really, like, you know, the community will be super happy about it. Like, why don't we just do that? But at this point, all the TOs were just saying, like, no, we want like an Anderson Semmler grand final. We don't care what you think, you know, basically. So there's no way to pull the brakes on that, unfortunately. So I would say that all culminated in like sort of in just like I think a lot of frustration for Semmler especially, and the more that he tried to, I think, kind of, you know, battle the community on his front, the more they battled him, and then it just kind of spiraled from there, right? And I think at some point it became obvious to me that on some level we need to pull the brakes on this. Like, this is not gonna get better while all the pressure is on. So I was like, let's just take a deep breath and figure out like where to go from here. And in the meantime, like, I'll try and do some casting with Jason, and I think Semmler basically said, okay, well, in that case, like, you know, I'm gonna go investigate what I want to do from this point on, you know, in terms of, you know, is it Overwatch or is it something else, right? But I would say that you know, and I'm sure Semmler would agree, like, there were like 10 different things that all like accumulated essentially in 1 year of his life. That just made it like a crazy world for him to be in, for sure. And and when you all the spotlight's on you, like that's mega hard to handle. Like I'm shocked that he, in some sense, survived all of that stuff, because that, like, a lot of people would have never ever got up from that position. Like they would have that's it. Like that would have been the point in which their life just never returns to anything good from that point on. So crazy.
No, I mean, I would even say I actually do think if he could replay it, I would have had played it differently. Like first of all, in the modern day, even though this might sound cynical, if he'd have just said some of the stuff that had happened, it might have curried him some favour. These were things that were very easy to sympathise with if you know they were quite extreme things in his life. Yep. Certainly not his fault at all. And then secondly, as you say, if anything, he was almost too much of a pro, and because it made it look like he was still just doing his job, people didn't know this was like weighing on him, etc. So no, I'm with you on that angle. One thing I want to ask you is this. I'm going to be intentionally vague here because I know how industry works. So after you've done the ELEAGUE thing, the Blast thing, you've broken up with Semmler, etc., there was a time period where you didn't get some of the biggest events. You still did a bunch of events a year, and until recently you were still doing like a solid amount per year, and there was still plenty that I'm sure paid well, and you would still see you on our screens and our streams, etc. But if you look at the absolute biggest events of the year, whereas before you would do like 90% of them, now you maybe did like 25, 50 if you were lucky on a good year. And clearly people know from some recent interviews you've done, this is something that like maybe got to a head and got extreme, and you were starting to wonder, are you getting hired at all? Or am I really just a relic and I'm just something from the past, and I'm not even going to be a CS2 guy? That was just, I'm the CSGO guy. Was that what was this period like to deal with? Like, were you kind of aware like things are getting tricky now? I mean, obviously recently you've made it public, but what would you say to this whole topic? It's tricky, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all of it kind of like echoes back to this. Like I said in the beginning, basically, is that when I started doing casting, I had this unshakable confidence in like everything that I did, and that confidence lasted like all the way up until the point where, like I said, there was this 1 year where like, my daughter was born, and I'm basically trying to work to kind of like keep things going after having sort of been out of the work market for I think it was like 2 or 3 months, basically, because the whole end of the pregnancy became super complicated for very many different reasons, and it was a bit of a nightmare situation. And she was born like 2 or 3 weeks early, so that means you're in like the NICU, which is a weird place to be to begin with. And it's like it was just a lot of really sort of stressful things. And like I said, fundamentally, once I got back to casting Counter-Strike, we were in a position where like I really needed to do a lot of events. And so I called everyone and said like, listen, I'm super back, like let's go. So I booked out like all the rest of the year, and then it's no joke, the Friday when I had finally like got the rest of my year booked in, somewhere in like, I don't know, would have been like April or something. From that Friday, like my dad called me and said like, hey, listen, I'm going to be dying of cancer in the next like 3 or 4 months or something. And I was like, oh, that's great. Like I'm not even home. Like I'm just literally going to be traveling around, and I have no choice even. I can't even do anything about it. So that somewhere in that, all of that happening. And again, I was working on Skybox. Like when I wasn't traveling to do all these events, I was traveling around to try and find funding for a new started company and stuff like that. It was like a totally insane world that I was in. And then ultimately when he died, and I just kept on working, I was like, okay, that sucks. Like we're going to go to the funeral, but then I'm on to the next event and so on and so forth. I think I traveled to an event like the day after the funeral. I was like, I'm out, doing more work again. And a year later, to the exact day when he died, like 1 year later, I just had this like crazy, what I know now is like an anxiety attack, but I had no idea what that was at all. I just thought, I'm dying. Like, this is crazy. And I had no idea about the context of it either. And my sister, actually, my younger sister, she said to me, like, you understand this is like the day that he died? And I was like, really? Like, and then I instantly recognized, oh, something in my body just kind of remembered. I didn't even remember at all. I was like working. And then I was like, okay, this is really bad. I basically need help. Like I need to find a psychologist. I need to find a therapist. I need to find somebody to like help me with this. But when I meant help, I meant like I need help in like the next week or two. I'm fucking busy. I'm working. Like I can't stop my whole life, right? So like, can we just snap our fingers and just get moving with this help stuff? And obviously that's not possible, right? Like, I built all this stress and chaos over like a really long time. You can't just undo it in like 2 weeks. But so like that whole journey for me took, I think, a lot out of my ability to really be like the best person that I could be in front of a camera. And again, like, it's hard to like synthesize how much is happening in this time, but like there's, I'm casting with different people, and Skybox is happening in the background, and that's in itself like a huge job to try and build a company in general. And it's just like there's a million things that are going on, and I don't think I'm not taking it very seriously when it comes to like figuring out how to sort of save myself in all of this stuff. And I think the result, just like the end result, is that there are like a lot of years where like I'm probably showing up and I'm just not like, I'm not as focused on just the Counter-Strike stuff as I should be. Like, I'm focused on like all this other stuff, and I have my own good reasons for it. But like at the end of the day, the problem is I'm also competing with people like, fucking Scrawny and Londers, who are just unbelievably talented, or Chad and Alex, or Hugo and Harry. Like, there are all these other people out there who are mega good at doing it, and they are really focused on the game. And I've got like my own chaotic life that's happening in the background. And I think my initial response to like the sense that like, okay, I'm getting hired less and there's more of a struggle and there's more stuff going on, is like, I just feel so bitter about the whole thing. I feel like I've given so much of my life to trying to build this stuff, and not just in terms of casting Counter-Strike, but really, I've really thought like I'm trying to build like a healthy space for the future of Counter-Strike, whatever. Like, obviously, I'm not in charge of the whole game and the whole community, but just like from my little space in the casting position, it's like I'm trying to be what I think of as like a reasonable actor in the space. And now it just feels like none of it matters, and I'm just kind of like, essentially on my own, and that's it. And I just I really felt bitter about that, and it was an insane struggle for me to try to stop that bitterness, and just recognize that, unfortunately, like most of the blame is just with me in terms of not being able to focus on the game the way that I needed to. And it really wasn't until like the end of last year, like somewhere in middle of December in 24, was when I like really sort of recognized, holy shit, like I need to watch more Counter-Strike. I need to spend more time with it. I need to sort of relearn, like just pretend like I'm relearning it from the ground up, basically. So that's what I did. But like there was a long time before then when I had like a million other like way more noble thoughts, and way more like, the whole community's betraying me, fuck everybody, like that kind of thing, 100%.
Along those lines, what people might not know if they've never worked in this side of the industry is the weirdest thing about Counter-Strike is for each job at the S-tier events, which is where everyone wants to be, there really are like 4 or 5 people tops who are competing for that job. And it's why it's so cutthroat, because it essentially, think about this. If I told someone you have to be top 5 in the world at your job, they'd already be like, fucking hell. It's like, no, that's just to have a chance. You probably have to be top 2 to get all the events you want and all the things. So this is this point where this is why so many talent are insecure, and they're all like racked with anxiety and imposter syndrome, because they're all scared the second they drop me, or I fall out of favour, or I don't do a couple of events in a row. That's why people can't say no to the events. Then I'm out. And obviously you could argue you were in this position at one point in time. It must be, as a result, a crazy breath of like, to do the major again, to have just done a massive major.
Yeah. Well, it absolutely is, right? Like that obviously that's sort of a sign that, people say, okay, listen, we think you're in the category of people who we'd want to do this kind of an event, right? And even before then, right, like I ended up doing the PGL event and a Astana event, and I did Blast Rivals. So like suddenly there were like a bunch of events, right, that ended up saying, hey, listen, of course we want to find a way to work with you. But I think even before that, I think my mindset had already changed from like one of saying, oh no, I'm super panicked and I'm scared, and like, I mean, obviously it is really, really scary, but I'd convinced myself a little bit of the thing that I said in the start of like, I can do this no matter what. Like that was my mentality. I would say within the first couple of months of this year, I had a feeling that I was like, I just remembered suddenly why I'm good at the thing that I do. And like everybody casts the game differently, but like I have some very specific things that I care about. And it's once I remembered what those things were, I just suddenly realized like I can probably beat anybody at this. Like that was my feeling again. I was like, so if I work hard, I'm gonna find a way to prove that. And it's not to say that just that statement alone, obviously you can't pay the bank with that statement, but there's a part of me that was like, I'll find a way. Like I know I can do it. So, and you know, like, so I still feel that way. I feel more dedicated to that than I've felt in a really, really long time. So yeah, that perspective changed a lot for me. It really did.
I saw there was a thing that some fan just generated, I think. I saw it on DDK's Twitter, where they did like a moving graph, and it was all the CSGO and CS2, like S-tier events. And it was like, it went by events. And so, you know, it starts with Joe Miller at the front, and then it's like, you know, people like Torspot are there. And then as you go through the years, you know, some people rise and fall, and then the modern crop comes up. And even after all the years and all the ins and outs, all the bullshit, and these people hired and not hired here, you're still number one. You have the most S-tier events of anyone.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? It's pretty dope, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is another thing that another sort of reality check that I had to give myself at one point, which is like, that's another reason why it's hard to complain if you're me, right? Because at some point you have to look at like, okay, well, I've got to do so many things that it's like, if I'm complaining that like, what, like, you know, everyone else probably has way more of a, you know, of a reason to complain about. I think in terms of majors, I don't know for sure, but I think this last major was the 20th major that I ever did, which again I think is like a lot more than most people get to do. So it is just hard to complain about. I'm you know, just on the other side of it, I'm obviously insanely proud of that. I think it's the most. It's like the most fortuitous thing that could have happened in my life that I got to do this, because I don't know how many other things I really would be good at. Or the problem is most of the other things that I'd be good at are not things that can pay any kind of bills or anything like that. So I'm just, in that sense, I'm so fortunate to sort of have the opportunity. And I you know, that's what I try to think about more now than anything. And probably try to think of a way to sort of, how can I earn my position in terms of being allowed to do this for another 10 years, because if I'm allowed to, I will. It's not, I don't want to do other things too, but I really love casting Counter-Strike. So if I can keep, you know, doing the work and sort of proving myself, then I'll probably be here, you know, for a long time.
Here's a little detail that you can only come up with if you're the esports historian, mate, which is you're currently casting with DDK. Formerly of the Bardolph DDK duo, right? You did the major with him, you've done some other events. What people might not know, Anders, is that's one of the first people you ever cast with at one of those Faceit Cups back in 2013. So that must be kind of a bit surreal.
It actually is. This is so weird. Like, so back then, Faceit had a studio in Milan, in Italy. And Dan and some other people were basically living in they were like 3 or 4 people that were living in like one apartment. So it was just like, that was like the Faceit employee apartment for like 3 or 4 of those guys. And whenever I would go there, I would just live in the apartment too. So then we were like, you know, 4 or 5 people in this like really weird apartment. It was like, I wish I had more photos of that place.
But it's weird. I remember it didn't even have rooms. It was just like stairs went down. And so if someone was upstairs making sound, you're just getting woken up in bed. It was so weird. It was like sleeping on top of each other almost, wasn't it?
It was. It had like, one bathroom that was like basically in the kitchen, and the door couldn't close. Like it was just like an open plan bathroom. It's just super weird. And like those early Cubs as well, because it's in Italy. So whenever they all turn on the AC, the power would die in the entire city. You just have like a 3-hour delay because there was no power. Yeah. So like, yeah, Dan and I did like a ton of those early things like together, right? Like, and it was just like, there's some really funny photos of us being like way younger back then. Yes, I mean, I think it's a funny sort of sequence of events. And obviously I would say for a lot of people now, we're sort of living in the era where, unless you are like the sort of the absolute top duos in the world right now, it is kind of hard to have like a really serious partnership with anybody, because nobody really knows like what's happening in a month or 3 months or whatever. So it is super strange. But like, I know Dan has worked really hard to sort of get back into Counter-Strike casting. Obviously spent some time in Valorant and all the rest of it. So it is funny that it worked out this way for this particular major. It really is.
I have a thing I sometimes do. It's up to me if I feel like it in the interview, where sometimes for players, I'll give them like a quick fire round where I ask who was the best teammate, who was the most skilled, who was the clutchest, you know. And I always tell them I want a name, but give me a reason as well. So here's the first question. It's going to be a casting or talent version. Get ready. So who is the caster you looked up to the most?
Oh, you said quickfire. Probably Chad. I think obviously he's more of a color caster, but I think Chad's dedication to just living inside of the game and understanding as much of it as he possibly can is really cool for me. So I really appreciate that.
What about, and this is a really nerdy one that only casters will get, who do you actually think is the best technical caster? Like if we looked at, the different aspects of what you can do with the voice, and who's the best at that for you?
Easy Scrawny for me. It's crazy. I mean, it's a real joy to watch Scrawny kind of like go to work on things. And I bet if we ever wanted to sit down and just listen to like pause at the end of every sentence, like there's so many things that he just does insanely well. So that's an easy choice for me. Yes.
Who do you think, because I'm going to make this almost like rap, where in rap a classic element is floor, right? It's like, who's the smoothest caster?
Man, there are a lot of choices here. I have two that I would probably rank on a sort of similar level. I really think Vince is like insanely underrated when it comes to this stuff. Like he just has a way to always land like every sentence that I just really enjoy. And I think the other one for me is Harry. Like it's again, like I really feel like I don't always know where Harry ends up in like a situation. And when I listen, I am always nervous that we're just about to end up in a place where like the parachute won't quite deploy,
right?
But it always kind of does anyway. So for me, those two are like, I think in a cool category for that. If we can, I don't know if flow is the exact right word, but that's what comes to mind.
Along the similar lines in rap music, you'd call this lyricism. Who has the best wordplay?
Oh, who has the best wordplay? I mean, you would have to give like a shout out to Sedekist on this front, right? Like obviously his ability to construct and land those sentences in the perfect position, it's got to be like super high up there. So so probably Sedekist would be the obvious choice here.
Who is the funniest?
Ooh, judging humor is really hard. I think. It's because I know these people off camera as well, so I know that Alex is a super funny guy to be around. For me, if I had to pick, between all of them, it's hard to do. But like Henry, for me, it's because Henry has a style of humor that I love, which is like this, slightly sort of melancholy British kind of humor. But it's funny you said earlier. You said Henry wanted to be like a rock star. The thing is, I actually genuinely think that if Henry got casted to be an actor in something, he could do it. Like I think Henry is out of all the people in the space,
pretty good in those skits.
Yeah, he's a crazy talented person. He really is.
What about who is the most underrated?
Who is the most underrated? God damn. There are probably two. Like I personally, I think Vince is probably one of the more underrated characters in the space. Just my opinion. I think he has, he's such a solid like grasp of how to cast any round of Counter-Strike, in my opinion. Like he can do like a lot of different things. I think so. So for me, Vince is a big pick. I know this is weird because him and Chad essentially are like the number one. Do I actually think Chad is underrated? Because I think a lot of people don't understand like how much he like delivers in terms of like what he says about the game. Like I fear that like 90% of the community have no idea what he's talking about when he's like highlighting some aspect of like some niche aspect of how like people throw this Molotov on Ancient or something. But let's just say Vince for the minute.
What about, and for this one, I'll make it impossibly expansive. You could pick someone from another game too. You could have someone in history. Is there someone that it would be a dream to cast with?
Someone that'd be a dream to cast with. There's gotta be a few people. I mean, in the in the Dota space, I think there are a lot of really funny people that I think would be fun with. I know, so I talked sometimes to Capitalist. I really like his style of casting, but you know, the people like you know, some of these different people they have in Dota, like Cinder and all the rest of it, like they have this kind of weird, I call it anti-personality in Dota, where it's like the whole point is to be as, you know, like, you know, almost like the least sociable that you can while still on camera. And I just think for me, it's super funny. So I actually think I could fit somewhat well into that. I think it'd be funny to try. Someone that would just be like super sick to cast within history or just even outside of the game. Damn, that's a tough question. I guess honestly picking like a comedian could be just a funny choice, you know. Just if you had to try and do it, like if you ended up with like you casting a game of Counter-Strike with Theo Vaughn or something like that, that could be fun, you know?
Okay, that's an interesting image. At the end of this interview, Anders, do you have a final message? Do you want to thank anyone or say hello to anyone?
I think probably more than anything else, I think I sometimes, you know, through all my like stressing about like what's happening and, you know, what does the future look like and all the rest of it, like I sometimes end up forgetting a little bit, like maybe how much, like sometimes I'm reminded how many people are out there who sort of do remember some of the old days and you know, and do all of that stuff. And I am grateful for that in general. Like I said, in my more cynical moments, I sort of want to childishly want to throw it all away and say, oh, like I worked so hard and it was all for nothing or whatever. Like, you know, that like those are sort of my worst moments, I think. And I feel like whenever I'm reminded that, you know, that there are still people out there who sort of care, but they just have their own lives and they're busy doing things or whatever. I really appreciate that. And I'm super thankful for that. And then, I mean, I would say, you know, yeah, just this is for a personal thing for me, probably, obviously. Throughout all of this, like, just compound all of the mad stuff that I, you know, have tried to sort of explain the best that I can, like what my life has been like. You have to imagine that while all of this is going on, my wife is basically just sort of a passenger in this car, and she like can't really decide where we're going because, you know, obviously she doesn't have any power of whether or not to get hired or anything else like that. So she's just had to sort of witness all of this with even sort of less control, and in some sense probably more stressful for her if you think about that from from her point of view. So I am crazy grateful that she's kind of stuck with it for all of it and has managed to sort of survive it with me. I think that's really incredible. So yeah, you know, I'm really, really thankful for that. I know it's not been easy for her. But you know, somehow we've managed to make it through. So that's really awesome.
Mangatak.
Mangatak.
You know, I'm always rep my set, and the people who've got my back are the following people who support my videos: Matt Pugnaccio Racula, Jason, Jensen Gore, Tosh, Toucan, and you know, the all-time ride or die, Jerky's Minion, isn't it? Special thanks to him. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Want to find out who the upcoming interview subjects are? Do you want to take part in one of those long discussions with me where you set the topics? Maybe you want to ask me a question for my video AMA? Well, all of those perks and more are available where? At the Patreon link in the description box below. So put your money where your mouth is and join the Screwminati today. You dig?